Hi there, I'm Coach Tracey Knight, and I want to thank you for joining me today for another episode where we're talking about how to navigate through broken or strained relationships at work, at home, and in the bedroom. And I'm focusing in on this segment around work. And in my last episode, which I want you to tune into, I talked about why it's so important to face conflict. See, as I said in that segment, I believe that life and leadership are just a game that we're playing for the duration of our lifetime. From the time we're born to the time we die, we learn how to play the game called our life. We're not just here riding a rock. Nope. Your higher power of your own understanding has given you the power and the authority to create the life that you desire. In fact, the objective of this game called life is for you to create a life that feels authentic, meaning you can be your whole self. If you're at work, you can be your whole self. You can speak your truth. You feel empowered. It means that you create a life that feels inspired. That means the work that you're doing causes you to jump out of bed each day. If it doesn't, you need to take my free quiz, Relationship Health, because we're trying to create a life where you're spending so much time in the workplace. Why don't you feel inspired by your work, by the people that you're around, which is the third objective of the game called life, which is to create a life that feels connected, so authentic, inspired, and connected, because there's 7 billion people on the planet. Clearly, we're not meant to live alone. We are meant to be in connection and in community with other people. The problem comes in when conflict shows up. Conflict looks a lot of different ways, I'm telling you. And today I'm going to be talking about the 6 stages of conflict. But when that conflict shows up, based on the way that we have been taught to navigate conflict, we may want to abandon, bolt, or get out of the relationship. That's why people quit their jobs so quickly, because their natural default mechanism is flee. Or for some people, it's to fight and dig your heels in and, be entrenched in your belief system. Instead of being in connection and being willing to it's not really about compromise, it's really about creating win-win solutions. See, this game called life that we're all playing has a constant to it. That constant is called change. And so change is inevitable. You cannot get around change. It is the only constant. Now, your growth is what is optional. Whether or not you can grow from the various situation and the circumstances that have been put in your pathway. They are designed to make you a stronger version of yourself, a stronger leader, a more powerful leader. So the question is, are you brave enough to face yourself and to discover the areas, the competencies, the skills that you may be deficient in that are causing your relationships to break or to feel strained or to feel like you can't show up and be your whole self? It does take a lot of bravery to do that. I will admit that. It is simple, but it's not always easy because we've been taught that this is really an indictment or a judgment against ourselves, when truthfully, really all our higher power is asking us to do is to lean in and learn how to grow into the highest, most expressed version of ourselves. And the way that we do that is through the 26 competencies of social and emotional intelligence. Conflict management happens to be one of those competencies. Tune into the previous episode where I talk a little bit more about what those competencies are, but today I really want to focus in on conflict. This is a social competence. When I give people my standard assessment to assess, much like an IQ test, this is an EQ test. Of course, you can check me out, ping me, DM me if you would like to take this assessment. But I can basically give you a score that really assesses each of those 26 competencies, including the one on conflict. The way that we face conflict is based on the way that we were socialized, the way that we were sort of reared. For some people, we've learned to be in battle and in war, and we're going to fight to the end. For other people, we've learned to shrink. We've learned to silence our voice, right? For others, they've learned how to manipulate to get their needs met. And so these are just habits that have been created. They work for us for a period of time, but then at some point they don't work, because when they start breaking the relationship, they're not working anymore. So I'm here to teach you how to create habits and patterns that are really going to help you to have healthy, productive, pleasurable, and peaceful relationships. So what I want to talk about now is the 6 stages of conflict. So what is conflict? Let me tell you what conflict is not. Conflict is not war. We can escalate to war, but conflict, again, in our mindset, we need to move beyond this idea of thinking that because we have conflict that we need to be in battle with someone. Conflict is really a difference of perspective. That's truthfully what it is. And that starts us off, as you will be able to see on the screen, with my diagram, that step 1 of any conflict is that we have a mild difference. That's all it is that one person has one perspective and another person has a different perspective. They have a different approach. They see it differently. They have a different outcome that they want to get. That's it. But what happens is, for many of us, we turn that into a disagreement. And that's the second stage. So now that we are in a disagreement, we may feel like we have to defend our position, right? We're in disagreement. We may start to hear our voice escalate. We may start to notice that our posture, our facial expressions are starting to change because we're in disagreement. Disagreements a lot of times are about making the other person wrong so that we can be right, okay? The third step is a dispute. Now we have escalated this. We in full on, we arguing about this thing, right? We are in complete dispute. And now you may start to see people getting entrenched. They're digging their heels in. And people dig their heels in a lot of different ways. Digging your heels in can look like, I know some passive aggressive people who won't give you all the information you need on a project. Because really what they're doing is manipulating and controlling the situation by withholding the information. We in dispute, right? For some people, in meetings, they're going to come in and they're going to try to undermine you, overtalk you, critique or criticize every single thing that you say, right? You're in dispute. For other people, they may talk about you behind your back. They complain about things to other people because they may feel like they can't say it to you. Okay, so we're in dispute. That's level 3 of 6. The next level is a campaign. Now, campaigns look like we are literally campaigning against you. So that's going to look like a lot of gossip, right? That means telling our story to get other people on our side. Can't you see it? If it's in the personal life, it may look like going to your girlfriends or going to your family and talking about your spouse. But in the workplace, a lot of times it looks like getting into cliques. It looks like maybe within your department, pitting one department against the other, or one group of people against another. Because we're basically campaigning for our position, for people to buy in, to tell us, I'm right, I'm right. At step 5 is litigation. So litigation typically means legal, but it can get to that. So in the workplace, it looks like going to HR, right? It looks like getting the boss involved, and there needs to be mediation. I do a lot of mediation in the workplace because people are so entrenched in their way of thinking and looking at things that they no longer hear anyone else. And so they need someone to mediate the discussion because you're not open enough, surrendered enough, you don't have enough faith in the relationship and in your ability to create a win-win situation that you could resolve it. So someone else has to come in and help you do that. The last and final stage is a stage of war. And in the stage of war, that's when things have just gotten destructive. They can get physical, they can become emotional, but at this stage, it really is toxic. So I'm wanting you to just do a quick assessment of the last time you had a conflict. And I'd like for you to think about writing down the different stages that you went through that got you to the place that it was breaking the relationship? Because when we're at step 5 and step six, we're really at a point where we're probably breaking the relationship. It's no longer just strained, like it's step 2, step 3. We're kind of like, it's a strained relationship. It starts to break at levels 4, 5, and 6. Sometimes it's irreparable, because so much damage has been done. So I really want you to think about the different steps and stages that you went through. And then finally, as I begin to close this out, I'd like you to start thinking about how sometimes these stages can also affect things like, they can come from things like inner conflict, interpersonal conflict, and group conflict. So let me give you some examples here. So inner conflict is where you question your own integrity, your values, and your ethics. And it's typically where you're doing the right thing versus what somebody else maybe wants you to do or what you think you should do. An example of this is of an inner conflict would be you committed to reducing your work hours to spend more time with your family, but you may feel conflicted about such a goal, especially because the office is really busy. Well, in that situation, it may start with a mild difference because you know that you need to set a standard for yourself in terms of stopping work at a certain time, and then you express that to your boss, and then maybe that escalates into a disagreement, later to a dispute on whether or not you can cut off at the proper time. But I really want you to think about the stages that it goes through when you have an inner conflict. Another inner conflict might be something like you disagree with your boss about a decision. Part of you wants to speak up, but another part of you does not. That creates an inner conflict inside of you. And when you don't address that at the mild different stage, what happens over time is you eat away and erode your own integrity, which is an EI competence. You eat away at your own integrity, and then over time, you either wake up not knowing who you are because you never spoke up and you going along with stuff that you don't even believe in, right? Or you speak up in a way that is aggressive and puts people on the defense. Okay, next is the interpersonal conflict. So with interpersonal conflict, this is a conflict between 2 or more people, and it may be caused by a number of factors, things like personality clashes, style clashes, cultural clashes, value clashes. There's a breakdown in communication, or sometimes it's workplace policies and practices that create that conflict. So the interpersonal conflict, a lot of times this is what we see is like personality differences or style differences. So I do a lot of work around helping people to understand their style and another person's style, and seeing the value and appreciating the difference, the uniqueness, not only in your style, but someone else's. And that we don't always have to do it the one way. There is no one way of getting at anything, right? So the more we can open ourselves up and recognize that sometimes we just have a difference of perspective, a different approach, then the more we can keep the conflict at a mild difference. Finally, I want to talk about group conflict. This may be relatively independent of individuals occupying roles, but maybe focus more on that them-us mindset that we sometimes get in the workplace, where it's a conflict between the finance department and, let's say, a program department or product development department, or a conflict between the board of directors and an executive director, or a team rivalry or disagreement, right? This is where you may also have, here's a big one, baby boomers versus millennials. Now, y'all know it is a whole thing. One of my trainings on bridging the generational gaps is all about these conflicts that we're having because of generations that escalate from mild difference all the way up to war, where we are really disrespecting and disregarding the other generation because they don't think like us and they don't always behave like we do, and they're not supposed to. They bring something unique to the table and it's valuable. So that's going to be it for today. But what I do want to encourage you to do is to go back to the last conflict you have, see whether or not it's an inner conflict, or if it is an interpersonal conflict or a group conflict, and to jot down how you went through the various stages of that conflict. And then finally, I want to invite you to tune in to the next segment, where I'm going to be talking about the different conflict styles and personality styles and how they show up in the workplace. I'm Coach Tracey Knight. I want to thank you for tuning in. I want to remind you to subscribe to the YouTube channel, then like us, tag us, share us with other people who may be in need of this information and could find it valuable. Until next time, I want to remind you that today is the day that we take back, transform, and begin to win at the game called life.